See if I need to cut the microphone down on this one. Okay, so we're communicating there. Let me. All right. So yeah, let me. I forgot all about that. I was supposed to be broadcasting. Let me pop them an email right quick. Hold on. Give me just a sec, Alex. Um, all right. Sorry about that. So that's the major difference between these two specific environments here is here you have a fully functional standalone computer, and here typically you log directly into an application program. And all of these apps, as I said, use the same operating system and the Docker. And Docker is actually a brand name and a function. The Docker engine actually manages that interaction between the hardware and all of the application containers that are running here. These things that, once again, they're isolated, they're not aware of one another. They are usually tightly secured. Okay. Um, there are, as I was saying, the virtualized machines, the virtual machines themselves actually share the four major resources on the server itself. So the server really needs to be beefed up if you're going to be accommodating a lot of virtual machines, as they do in cloud-based environments. They'll just configure these big fat um, server class machines, multi-core processors for the hyper-threading functionality, massive amounts of main memory, sometimes even putting in multiple network interface cards in the same machine, as well as just these mass storage devices there. This is a screenshot of the Hyper-V manager that comes along with Microsoft. And like I say, you have to have a professional license or above here. But you go in and you create individual virtual machine. You can perform all this whole host of actions over here on each individual VM. And you configure the VMs as to how you want them to be set up. You load the operating system onto those things. You basically allocate, usually as percentages or chunks of storage space, network time slice, CPU time slice, that kind of thing. Now, you have to understand too that these are, just because it's a virtual machine doesn't mean it's not a real computer. You have to secure it in the same way that you would secure a singular machine running on a singular piece of hardware. The operating system that you load into the VM has to be regularly updated, patched, so on. Just because you update the host operating system doesn't mean it updates the OS running in each individual virtual machine. So you truly have to, it's a different mindset to get used to it originally anyway. You have to treat the machines as if they are the standalone only computer system running on that hardware rather than sharing multiple pieces of hardware or different computers. Kaylee, welcome. I'm glad you made it, ma'am. Yeah, you're here much sooner than we expected you, but I'm glad you made it here. And as always, if you're going to be asking questions, you feel free to dive in on those suckers here. I hope
All right.
everything
Thank you,
works.
sir.
You are very welcome. So the client side, server side, two basic implementations of your virtual machines. The hypervisor is indeed the software, and you set it up either as standalone virtual machines or as the virtual containers, the containerized application container type of environment. Now, all of your cloud-based providers are indeed using virtualization to accommodate multiple users. Another really interesting thing about the virtualization and the management of the VMs is that you can set those up template based. So if I'm setting up a virtual machine environment in in a private enterprise, rather than having to have an individual server computer to service every user on in the environment, or even the workstations, I can scale these things down and use very thin computing appliances. Kaylee, we were talking about the other day about the netbooks or the Chromebooks, the real thin computing appliances that have really scaled down configurations. Very, they don't have to have the large, massive disk drive storage. So you can use those scaled down workstations and log them into these virtual machines running on these large, heavily configured server class machines. Okay. And that's how the cloud service providers provide the ability for users outside to log in and take advantage of those cloud resources and the virtual machines running there over an internet connection. The cloud-based environment is set up, and the framework and the platform is set up so that it is highly available. Actually, most of them right into their service level agreement. I mentioned this the other day as well. What they call 4 nines of service, 99.99% uptime. That's amazing. That's less than an hour of downtime per year. And they do it by setting up redundant systems, the virtual systems. If one's computer, the physical hardware computer server is having an issue, you can have it where it will automatically fail safe over onto another computer and pick right back up where it left off. The cloud-based environment is, by nature of the framework, is very scalable. They call it rapid elasticity, being able to scale up or scale down based upon the need of the users there. You also find that across the implementations and the deployment of the cloud-based environment, they build in by nature lots of redundancy. Most of your cloud service providers will go ahead and set up multiple data centers, redundant data centers. Many of them will set up 3 different redundant data centers in each region on every continent on the globe except for Antarctica. And many of them are what's called symmetrically joined together. So you can almost be guaranteed if you log in and create a cloud account and you create a virtual machine, you can just about bet $1 to a donut that there's at least one, maybe 2 other virtual copies of that being created somewhere that can act as redundant failovers if that virtual machine fails. So they're really up on their P's and Q's as far as providing that access and the redundancy baked into the framework and the infrastructure. Cloud-based environments come in 3 basic modes. There are public clouds. They call it multi-tenant. It's a shared resource. You may log into a virtual machine in your cloud-based environment, and you may be sitting right beside some completely different company. And more than likely, as a matter of fact, their virtual machine's running right alongside yours on the same piece of hardware, but you're not aware of them. They're not aware of you. You get what you consider full functionality in a standalone computing system there. Okay, but it's a shared resource. Anybody can create a subscription. You can create multiple virtual machines in your subscription. You have full management capability from the management console. Then there's private cloud. Private cloud is either a commercial product where you log in, or it can be deployed on site by a private corporation. But unlike the public cloud, it's not a shared resource. It's only private users in a private entity or company are using that particular cloud deployment space, whether it's a commercial entity that's hosted by some other company, or if you're setting up that infrastructure inside your own data center in your enterprise. Then we have what's called community cloud. Community cloud is a pretty interesting concept. Google actually has a community cloud. It's called the government cloud. they set up the cloud services and the infrastructure there to service government entities. Um, and you have to, have to be some sort of government or work for a government entity in order to use those cloud-based services. I've seen a couple of other instances of community clouds. For instance, the auto parts industry. Folks don't realize that in the auto parts industry, doesn't matter what their branding and the name of the company is. More than likely, they're all getting their parts and their service from the same, 3 or 4, 5 different vendors and manufacturers, distributors. So you have, if you're in the auto parts industry, then you can use the community auto parts community cloud. Same thing I've seen in like the real estate industry. If you have a real estate company or you're a licensed real estate agent, well, you can use those cloud services there. As well, sometimes you'll see companies that will set up, for instance, their own private cloud infrastructure, but then for things like, I don't know, archiving large storage files offsite, they will then set up a public cloud shared resource entity there. So that's called a hybrid cloud, by the way. The three basic service models inside one or the other of those cloud deployment models are referred to as software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. Software is exactly what it sounds like. You're basically leasing a software license and running the software online. The Microsoft Office products, you can get Office 365, and it's cloud-based environment. And most of your major software vendors now, they're not requiring that you download and install software on a client machine. You just run it online, you know. Um, then there is infrastructure as a service that you're basically leasing, as it were, virtual machines, and you decide how they're going to be configured. You decide the operating system is going to be loaded on them. You decide the software that's going to be set up. You configure all the networking components and you can actually virtualize an entire network if you want to. Set up routers and switches and firewalls and load balancers and gateways, and everything can be virtualized there. And then there's platform as a service. And if you really look at that, it's sort of like a combination of the other two, software as a service and infrastructure as a service, but it's more of a template type environment. The systems, the virtual machines there come basically pre-configured. So, if you have a need, for instance, for setting up a website development environment with a database engine, well, you can more than likely find a template that is already defined for that particular platform, and you basically lease that platform. And the thing about these is it is pay as you go. You lease and pay for each virtual machine on a monthly basis. And then there's desktop as a service. Now, this is a relatively new thing that we've seen come along. This used to be sort of rolled into, um, you know, combinations of these other three, but they've got it set aside now where very thin access on your system that you are logging in and using, and then the desktop configuration is done completely in cloud-based environment, everything on it. Very, very similar to the infrastructure as a service type of model, except they come pre-configured, much like the platform. Okay. All of your cloud service providers, there are three major ones. You guys are certainly familiar with them. There's Microsoft is the Azure cloud-based environment. Google is the Google Cloud. And then you have Amazon Web Services, AWS. Either of those have a management console. When you set up a subscription, you get access to your management console. And the thing about the management consoles, they look a little bit different and they're branded according to whomever the provider is, but they give you access to everything in the cloud-based environment. And another function of that is it's called measured or metered service. The infrastructure of the cloud environment itself knows what you use, and you only get billed for what you use. Now, and some of the service providers too will sort of do a real time audit for you, and they'll even offer up suggestions. If you go in and you create 50 virtual machines, they'll do some metric analysis, and they even may inform you, you're paying for 50 virtual machines out here because they're all up and active, but you're only actually using on a regular basis 30 of those. So they'll give you some assistance in some cases on optimizing the utilization there. There are lots of people are using the cloud primarily as a mass storage appliance. That's some of the very first cloud functionality we started seeing with, like Dropbox and those types of services, allowing people to, in essence, lease online storage. And now, of course, it's evolved and moved into a lot of other service offerings there. But you can store files in a cloud-based environment, synchronize those dynamically with your own on-premise files. You can, for instance, in your cloud-based environment, for instance, setting up your directory services, you can synchronize those, link those locally in the cloud-based environment, and manage them pretty much from either side of the equation there. There are also these large cloud-based environments that lots of organizations are beginning to, especially these large corporations, organizations that their business model is in creating, housing, and making available different kind of content, whatever the content might be, video, audio, programming, language, whatever. So they set up these large content delivery networks in the cloud-based environment, and they, as the same model, they spread those across multiple data centers, sometimes all around the world, so that anybody anywhere, if they get an internet connection, well, they can jump in and have access to that data storage. Okay. So that's the cloud-based environment in a nutshell. It is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. You should absolutely dig deeper into the cloud-based environment because we're using it every day, just about. So having a good solid handle on how that environment actually operates will only enhance your particular career, because more and more organizations now are beginning to, at the very least, sort of, I always say they're dipping their toe in that cloud pond to see if indeed they might want to do a little swimming there. Okay. So, take that to heart, educate yourself more on the cloud environment. I would bet that you guys may have already had some experience operating in that cloud-based world. At least a high level access and experience to it. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and go through the. Well, do I want to do that? Yeah, I tell you what. Let's go ahead while we are here. And now, you folks that may be looking in on YouTube, I'm going to have the students now do a quick quiz here, and of course, you on YouTube won't be able to do that, so you guys just hang with us. It'll be relatively quick. The module quiz here has 10 questions, short questions. So what I'm going to do for you all is set up you a timer, real quick timer, 10 minutes only. And you guys go in and take that quiz and then post your scores. For those of you that may be dialed in on YouTube or listening, we always have our students take their, or I do have my students take their quiz real time. I have them post the scores online for each other to see in their chat box, and they own those scores. They are proud of those scores. And we also highly recommend repetition on these quizzes, because repetition, doing them again and again, is hands down the best way to embed this information in long-term memory. So you guys on YouTube just hang with us, and you students here in class with me, go ahead and do this quiz. And I'm gonna set the timer now. If I see when I, as soon as I see your scores in the chat box here, we'll go ahead and pull this timer down and get on into the next module as well. So enjoy yourself with that. All right, well done there. Well done on the quizzes. Now I want to go over that. I want to cover some of these quiz questions here. I want to point out to you guys and show you some things about the way the quiz questions are formed here. These are very similar, in some cases identical to the quiz questions you're going to get on your certification exam. A couple of things about them. All right, come on. That I want you to really, really pay attention to. I find students oftentimes make quick decisions because they are not reading all of the available options that are available on the quiz questions themselves. Okay. First, before you answer the question there, make certain that you read all of the question itself, and then make sure that you read each and every item on the list before you make a selection. Some people tend to want to, rush through it because they see the time clock, they're under a timer, the time clock running down. And they'll, if the first one or two questions that they find there looks like it may be right, they'll select that and just go on without reading the others. I've made that mistake myself quite a bit, as a matter of fact. When you're going through the quizzes here in classroom time here, always tell it that you would like to review your question later. Okay. So check this box here. Okay. So, after reading everything there, the IT team wants to ensure high performance and scalability for enterprise level workloads. After reviewing the options, which type of hypervisor should the company choose and why? Okay. Type 2 host based because it's easier to install. Container virtualization because it provides lightweight virtualization without the need for a hypervisor. Virtual desktop infrastructure because it centralizes development management and reduces hardware costs. Or type 1 bare metal because it runs directly on hardware and is optimized for enterprise type of solutions or environments there. So after reading, once again, a company is evaluating virtualization solutions for its IT infrastructure. The goal is to maximize hardware utilization by running multiple operating systems directly on the server hardware without the need for an underlying host operating system. Now, if you remember the discussion that we had about the difference between the type 1 and the type 2, in that case, the answer should be, evident there. Okay. You check the answer here and it's going, yep, that's the type 1 because it doesn't have the underlying, operating system requirement on the hardware itself. It runs right on the metal. And when you check those answers, it gives you the related information to further iterate what we talked about in the lecture portion, as well as to point you to the correct answer. So I'm telling you, this is one of the best tools that you can use here in order to prep yourself for your certification exam.
So I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Kayla.
Do you have any data on specifically CED Solutions and the test scores for the A plus prep course? Do you have any um, data on what is the average quiz score for a student?
Right. I do not, and uh, that's I may start just capturing that. I will tell you just from experience. I've been teaching this class now for about the last 6 years. Just from experience, it all is dependent upon the level of experience that the student brings to the class. I've had students that come to this class with their only experience with computers is they use it for email, they browse the internet, you know. I have also had users come to this class with 3, 4, 5 years of experience doing computer support, and they have to get the certification to because their job said they had to. So there's certainly a variance in those scores based upon what the student brings to the class. Generally, I find students that come to the class with little or no actual hands-on experience, their first cut anyway at the quiz scores are, 40%, 50% generally. I find those that come to the class with 3 to 5 years of hands-on experience with computer systems and supporting them already. Generally, their quiz scores are somewhere in the 60 to 75 percentile. So I mean, and so yeah, I mean, you guys are hitting right along those averages, and that's just from my own personal experience. I would bet there's probably some metrics out there, published and available, and you have piqued my interest now. I will. I'm going to do some research and see if I'm not able to actually provide the answers to that question to you with hardcore data. Um, it's not something that I track with my students because when they take the quizzes first time, it's like I'm saying, it's all good news because you know what you know and you know what you need to work on. And then the second time they take the same quiz, they boost the scores up a little bit. Third time, they really start boosting those scores up really well. So it moves in that sense from a memorization kind of thing, which is largely concerned with our short-term memory, into moving it into our long-term memory. Now you know the information. And I tell you, I cannot iterate enough times the importance of doing that repetition again and again and again. And that's the Hermann Effinghaus forgetting curve thing I think I mentioned on Monday. He was talking about, especially adult learners. If you have some new bit of information you learn at 8 a.m. this morning, and you don't repeat it anymore, you don't use it, you don't repeat it, you don't rediscover it, then about a couple of days later, you've lost about 20% of that knowledge. A couple of days later, 20 more percent. After about a week, it's gone. The knowledge is gone because it was all just working memory and short-term memory stuff. The repetition, then he found that those metrics said if they new information at 8 a.m., if you visit that same information or do something to use it again at 12 noon and then again at 6 p.m., you know it. So it's provable by science that those things actually work. So I always have my students do that as much as we can, and it really does drive the information home.
Well, I'd be curious to see how effective this course is within a 5-day period for those who are pretty new to this,
Hmm.
to see, the data on their quiz scores, how long it takes them to actually study for the exam beyond the 5 days,
Right.
and what is the successful rate of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because so far I I don't see how I would even be prepared by the end of the 5 days. It moves so fast that I can't even take notes.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, the lady when I talked to on the phone says it's normal. It's like a drinking from a fire hose. And I'm
That's
like,
right.
well, I mean, in my opinion, as I guess if I was in a position of a teacher, I'd want the students to be prepared by the end of the 5 days that they would actually be able to take the exam. But I don't see how that would be possible for someone brand new to this.
Yeah.
Um, so it just sounds like they kind of really rush things through. Not that it's your fault because you're just the teacher here. Um, but yeah, I don't see how someone would be prepared with just a basic level and be able to take the exam at the end of 5 days. It seems very rushed and that they could organize this a whole lot better.
Yeah, again, Kaylee, it's all based upon what the student brings to the class as well. And there is you hit it right on the head, like drink from a fire hose. There's massive amounts of information here thrown at you by the end of the week. That's why I try to break it down into, the information that we give is one thing, but then prepping for the certification exam itself with the repetition on these questions and answer stuff, that's really what's targeted towards prepping you to do well on the certification exam. And my recommendation typically is always, especially someone that doesn't bring, 3, 5, 4, 10 years of experience to the table, is that it truly is on you to do the homework, to do the study, and you've been doing a great job yourself of asking questions. I find too many students don't do that. So you've been doing that very well, as a matter of fact. But studying the material, running through the quizzes. I know I've assigned you what, 2 dozen quizzes or a dozen quizzes over the last couple of days alone for your homework at night. And it's the short, sweet 5 question, 10 question quizzes, but it's those that are designed to really pinpoint the high points that you're going to be questioned on your exam with those quizzes. So just, hang with it, keep doing those things, keep asking the good questions, and repeat, repeat, repeat on these quizzes. And I would say within a couple of weeks of doing those things again and again and again and again, we have lots of students that come into this thing just bare bones that end up knocking their certifications out of the park. Have a pretty high success rate for across the board on all ranges of students on passing these exams. And that's within 2, sometimes 3 weeks after taking the class. But they actually did do what I'm telling you guys to do. They did the repetition. They took the quiz questions again. If they encountered terminology, for instance, acronyms, abbreviations, terminology in general that you aren't aware of, that's where I gave you guys the concept of making your own flashcards. But it's a drill, drill, drill kind of thing between now and the time you schedule the exam. You have to keep the information fresh in your mind. And again, because of the massive amount of information we covered during this very short week, boot camp kind of data dump there, that's just half of the battle there. The other is on you guys as far as prepping the information, studying the information, making the flashcards, doing the quizzes again and again and again, and driving this information into that long-term memory there. So I really appreciate your questions. I believe me, I do understand your concern. But if I'm promising you, if you will do these things, and I'm talking about religiously do these things, taking, building the flashcards, studying those flashcards, doing all of those, the quiz questions that we have for homework at night, and you do it again and again and again, that repetition will help you, or that repetition will help you to do very well and pass these exams here. But thank you, ma'am, for the question. I really appreciate that. George, I see you have joined the party here. If you would be so kind as to give me your last name. I like to always track my students here. You can just key it into the chat box or turn your mic on and shout it out, either one. And George, I see your mic is on, but I am not hearing you. Probably you may just need to type it into your chat box here. I'm sharing with you my email address. So, all right, George is gone. Okay. All right, here. All right. Now, this next module here is going to be specifically oriented towards giving us information about mobile devices, how we support them, the hardware configuration, the software configurations. And we'll get pretty deep into this kind of stuff. We are seeing more and more utilization in IT environments of mobile appliances. There's, of course, your mobile phones. Everybody got a mobile phone. Everybody, you can't go anywhere without seeing a gazillion people like this, even driving down the highway. But we have also these very, very powerful tablet devices, your iPads and the Android tablet devices. And there's this relatively new beast on the horizon here. We don't see it yet as much in North America as we do in other parts of the world. but it's a hybrid appliance. It is they call it a phablet, Phablet. It is a fully functional tablet device, full computing appliance, internet connectivity, everything. But it is also incorporates the cellular communications function into that same device. And we're seeing lots of those, especially in other parts of the world, and they're coming to North America as well. Your mobile devices now are it's a common utility that everybody uses. Just about everybody now is beginning to use these things. Lots of text messaging, internet access, of course, cellular communications, audio and video communications. All of these things now are sort of it's a utility that everybody has now. Listen for music, either plug-in headset or a Bluetooth speaker connection on these things. Many of them now, especially the newer models, the phablet type devices, you've seen the ones that fold open and it's a wider screen. Um, and many of them have, of course, all of these things have touch capability. A lot of them now we're seeing people are using the stylus actually for writing and touch screen kind of functions there as well. The touchpad on these things is something that you configure. You can go into the settings of the device and configure it on either the mobile appliances or on your desktop, your laptop systems there as well. You decide the characteristics of how the touch is going to work. Like same thing as configuring a mouse in essence. Is a double tap does one thing, a single tap does this. So you configure all of that with your settings menu on these devices. Most of now your mobile appliances, especially mobile phones and tablet devices, have a USB connectivity. Many of them will have your micro SD card slide in for expanding memory, things like that. They many of the tablet devices also, for instance, the iPad. The old version of the iPad is using the lightning cable for charging the device and for file transfer. Some of them, according to the device itself, uses the Mac OS Thunderbolt cable, and that's actually the same specifications as USB-C. And we're seeing most of the manufacturers now, I talked about this earlier, that are moving towards that USB-C as the standard, even Apple, those devices. So we looked earlier at this port replicator when we were talking about the hardware components. You see these now. I mean, some of the ports here are just obsolete. You don't see them anymore. And then most of your laptop devices now will have combinations of different communication ports around the edges of it. So you don't hardly see these guys much anymore, these port replicator devices. I have one of these over collecting dust in my closet now. I had an old HP laptop computer that I used for my training computer. And on the bottom of the chassis was a plug port that would sit like this guy right here, right down on top of that. And that charged my battery. And it also provided the ability for the laptop to be the computing appliance. But on the back side of it, it had much this same type of configuration. Had all these ports on the back side. I would put my laptop in the docking station while it was charging the battery. It was also the computer. Didn't even have to open the case. I put external monitors hooked up on the back of this thing here. So dual purpose kind of function there. Now that the port replication stuff, like I have two different USB port replicators that plugged into each side of my laptop here. So you just don't see this used much anymore. Folks that still have, older hardware. I still have my old HP computer. I just don't use it anymore. It's a relatively slow processor, and it began to, like me, get a little bit long in the tooth there. All of these systems now have the multiple wireless communication capability, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Some of them also, for instance, mobile phone has the near field communications, NFC. That's that tap to pay kind of function. All of the portable appliances, you can basically set them into sleep mode. Mobile phones and tablets, they call it airplane mode. where it basically, uh, in essence, goes into hibernation, as it were, but it also disables all of the wireless communication capabilities, cellular, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. Um, so according to the device, you go into the different areas of the menus and turn that on or off, airplane mode. And it's sort of the same concept anyway as putting a computer system into hibernate or sleep mode. It still has power to it, it's still powered up, and there's still limited functionality that it will perform for you, but it really sort of shuts off the wireless communications capability there. The most of your cellular data networks, now I mentioned this earlier yesterday, there were two different flavors of worldwide cellular communications. There was the the cellular division multiplexing, CDMA, and then there was your GSM, your global subscriber type of networking. The GSM has always required a SIM card, which is your subscriber identity module. The CDMA, even though most of the phones had the SIM card, they didn't use it to transfer data from tower to tower to tower as you were working through their network. The generations of the cellular networks now have come all the way up now to 5G, fifth generation and beyond. Very high speed. The as of the 4G LTE, the long-term evolution 4G, it much higher speed, upwards of 300 megabits per second as far as the data speed. And then now the fifth generation there is just screaming fast bandwidth, screaming fast speed on those. And that's what I was telling you yesterday. There's a lot of people that are now beginning to use their fifth generation cellular phone as their internet connectivity as well. Most of the phones now are, some of them still use the physical SIM card. Oh, excuse me. I know the new one that I got here about a year ago, it has a slot for a physical SIM card, but it also can create an eSIM, an electronic SIM, and that's a chipset that's on board on the motherboard, where I can actually configure two lines coming into the same device if I wish. You decide how you're going to set up all of the settings inside your mobile device. You can tell it things about, who your carrier is, if you're turning Wi-Fi on and off. I know the cellular provider I use allows me to make Wi-Fi calls rather than the cellular network calls, and sometimes those are faster. It doesn't really get into a charge against my cellular data. Of course, I mean it's unlimited everything nowadays, but they still track it. And even in the unlimited plans, the cellular networks, if you exceed a certain threshold, they'll bump your speed back. They call it throttling. So you still get the connectivity, it's just slower speed. All of these devices allow me to do this tethering function. And that is usually through a hardwired USB cable that will allow me to share the communication capability of the device with an alternate device. I can also set it up, of course, as a Wi-Fi hotspot and offer that same Wi-Fi connectivity to up to 5 different external devices. We also see that, using the Bluetooth connectivity, that's where they create what we called our PAN, our personal area network. Set my phone up with earbuds, set my phone up with a speaker that I can play music through a speaker, or hook it up to my automobile and use the Bluetooth connectivity in the automobile for sending and receiving the phone calls. You also have the capability inside this device to set up different level or different layers, if you will, of security. I can set up a strong security environment using same kind of security concept I would set up with a wireless access point. It's called Wi-Fi Protected Access, WPA. And I set up a strong passcode that's required to use the device. Um, some of the devices also allow me, much like, excuse me, much like my wireless access points, to select The frequency band I'm going to be using 2.4, or Bluetooth is a 2.4 frequency wireless connection there. I can Bluetooth also is dependent upon what they call pairing the device. I've seen lots of users, unfortunately, they walk around all day, every day with their device constantly pinging Bluetooth set up into auto pairing mode. Well, that really opens it up for the thieves, thugs, and malcontents to be able to take over and abuse that device. Read all the information attached to the device, even lock you out of that device. I've also seen users that perform this function is called jailbreaking or rooting, and they do it so that they can sideload applications onto these appliances without having to go through the official app store. But I tell you, every time that's done, well, 99% of the time they do sideload apps, they got some malware riding along with those apps on the devices as well. So I just, if I'm going to allow somebody to hook up their mobile phone to my computer network, if it's rooted or jailbroken, rooting is what they call it in the Android systems. Jailbreaking is what they call it in the iOS for the most part. If I, recognize those systems are rooted, they don't get to log into my network. In the pairing situation in the Bluetooth systems, you basically get a PIN code, and it will typically send a Bluetooth message. Well, here's the PIN code. Is this the proper PIN code? Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'll accept that. So then I'm talking to those devices. You can actually set up a network of up to 8 different Bluetooth devices, all communicating with one another. It's called a PicoNet. Pretty interesting interchange of all kinds of data and files and information by that type of network. Here is the NFC I was talking about. This is yet another wireless communication function. That was originally set up to be able to share files by just basically putting two devices close proximity together. And the proximity is about 9-10 centimeters, so real close proximity. Now we see it is used for these tap to pay contactless pay functions. Um, First time I ever saw that was I guess I was standing behind a lady in Trader Joe's, and the cashier, oh yeah, it's 64 whatever, and the lady's going, okay, boom, and I was going, wow. And I asked her about it. I had not seen it up to that point, and it was very new back then. So other communications capability on those devices, and all of them have it. Your mobile phones, your tablets, your phablets. There are also, amazing capacity on these devices nowadays. You have all kinds of application programs, of course, that you can download and install on these devices. The iOS apps for the Apple phone come from Apple's iTunes App Store. Um, they Many of them are free. Some of them are commercial products that you have to pay some very, very low fee for. In the Android environment, of course, they use the Google Play Store for those. Also, many of those free applications. Um, and you just download them over your wireless network, your cellular network there. One thing that I would caution people against is when you download and install these apps, by default, many of these things want basically access to your camera and your data and your location and your firstborn child. And I would say I try my best to limit what these things do or do not have access. And there's some of the apps that when you download and start to install them, they don't give you any option. They're going to have access to everything on there. They won't install it. I just say, okay, don't install, because there's some big time security holes there by allowing these applications full-time access to your camera and your microphone and your data and your contacts and your network connection, and the list goes on and on and on. So I choose not to do that. But being security conscious is something that you really should pay attention to on these devices, because there's so many of us now that are carrying around our lives on these things, you know, um, bank accounting, credit card information, personal identifiable information, and so on. So I would just be very, very cautious, and set up very strong, strict access controls. I'm a big fan of multi-factor authentication, setting up a requirement for a user ID and a passcode and maybe a fingerprint scan, that kind of thing. Um, you also can set up, and I do this pretty often on my machine. Um, I used to do it automatically Bluetooth. So whenever my mobile phone was in close proximity to my PC, application would fire up and it would automatically synchronize contacts and messages and phone numbers, things like that. Um, Now most of us are storing those data in some off-site storage kind of thing. Um, I still tend to make copies of it locally on my PC, but I do it manually now, not on an automated kind of basis. When you go in and, according to the type of device you're using there, you will more than likely have to set, if you're going to be using any of the online services by the OS holder anyway, you set up an Apple ID or a Google Gmail account and have online cloud-based synchronization of information and offsite storage of data too, so that when you drop that phone out the car window and it crashes on the pavement, well, when you get your new one, you'll be able to, without having to fat finger that stuff back in there, you can basically download it from that cloud-based storage there. But these are the kind of things you'll want to synchronize on a regular basis. Of course, any applications and the settings, passcodes, passwords that are stored locally, your messages, mail, contacts, calendar, everything there. Of course, on these appliances, just about everybody now is using them for email. I guess I've got 3 or 4 email accounts that I've configured on mine. Um, you can, of course, set those up as an enterprise email client. I do. I use my Outlook email on here for my company. I also use my personalized email, my own email server that I have with my website and so on. Most of the email setup software now will allow you to do an auto discovery of like email services, and even the preferred protocol for downloading the email from the email server to your device. Lots of now your more reputable email service providers are providing that auto discovery functionality, and it automatically fills in the inbound and the outbound SMTP services, simple mail transport services. And basically, what you have to supply is your user ID and your passcode. And then it will pretty much configure just about everything else. Lots of your email providers now are requiring that you set the email up in the secure email channels rather than using the non-secure ports. Ports 110 and 143, they'll use the high level ports, not 993, 995 for the email delivery services there. So it's much more automated kind of thing now, as far as being able to configure and set up multiple email accounts on the same system there. But you can go in and manually configure it. You go in and configure everything about it. The inbound SMTP server, the outbound SMTP server. Of course, username, passcode, you have to fill out that information. Here's what I was talking about syncing this thing to my PC. I usually do that still wirelessly, USB or wireless connectivity. You can set it up pretty much either way. You can hardwire it, cable it, tether it, or you can do it wirelessly. I tell you, I have gotten away from now actually, even though I use my phone with the Bluetooth setup in my automobile, I don't synchronize um, my contact list with with my own automobile. I do, but not with like rental cars, things like that, because it is a bugbear to actually get them to forget that information, to delete it. You really have to get under the covers to erase that information from from the onboard database engines that keep that stuff in automobiles. Um, but you know, it's very convenient hooking up the Bluetooth to your car, so you don't have to look at a phone handset in order to place and receive calls. Um, there's with the synchronization there, like I was saying, I decide what I want to synchronize. My contacts, my calendar, my messages, my video, my audio, my images, you know, whatever. And I decide how I want to do that. I do it either wirelessly or hardwired, typically USB cable. Now, from an enterprise and organizational perspective, many organizations will set up these systems that allow individual users to bring their own device to the party. I mentioned earlier in the week the deployment models BYOD, CYOD, bring your own device, choose your own device. There's another couple of them. There's a corporate owned business only, COBO, and COPE, corporate owned, personally enabled. The bring your own device now is becoming more and more accepted, rather, not just really popular, but accepted in enterprise in general. But you do have to put some controls on that thing. So the companies that are doing it in a smart manner are hooking up these, they call it enterprise mobility management systems. And down inside of those, there's mobile application management, mobile device management, and unified messaging subsystems down in there. And in essence, what you do is you register your handset, either your mobile phone or your tablet, with these EMM systems so that it knows them. Um, and then it also gives the EMM systems the ability to sort of reach into those appliances when they attempt to log into the network and look at the configuration, see if it's in compliance. And you know, that's what I was talking about. If I look into somebody's phone and realize that it's been jailbroken, well, they don't get to log into my network because you never can tell what's riding along with those side-loaded applications there. Okay. There's several of these that are available from individual vendors, of course, commercial products. Um, the likes of AT&T and IBM and those corporations, they have their own enterprise mobility management systems. There's commercial products, there's those that are open source, same thing. Okay. Microsoft and Microsoft Azure cloud-based environment, they have their enterprise mobility management software that they make available there as well. And I mean, you go in and you set up the, they call it application restrictions, device restrictions. And in essence, it allows you to look into that appliance, as I said, when it goes to log into the network, and you decide if the configuration is in compliance with what your hardware and software um, um, guardrails actually happen to be. All of these guys here too, your mobile phones, your tablet, your phablet devices, they all now are including this global positioning satellite GPS circuitry hardwired right onto the motherboard. And it gives you that, you know, that satellite triangulation, longitude, latitude definition on the device itself. That same circuitry is also being utilized in the mobile phones for they call IPS systems, indoor positioning systems. And they are very accurate because not only does it utilize satellite-based triangulation, but also cellular tower triangulation. So, I mean, these things are accurate now up to about a meter. The old, I don't know if you guys remember the old global positioning satellite systems. First, the GPS unit itself was some big old boat anchor sized device. You use it as a weapon. And originally, those things were only accurate up to about 10 meters. Okay. So, but boy, the ones they're on now, it can pinpoint an exact location of the appliance. You go in and you define the location services. You define the type and amounts of information that is going to be able to be derived if somebody can locate that appliance. Okay? And then, of course, that information is shared with the cellular company if you use in the indoor positioning systems. but they already know where that device is anyway. Okay. So let's see what time we have. Yep, I've had you guys here strapped to your seat now for about an hour and a half. So this is a good stopping point here. I'm gonna set your timer up and give you guys about 15 minutes for a quick morning break. That ought to give you plenty of time to go and do your latrine break, as well as maybe refill that coffee or juice cup. Now, you folks that are tuned in on YouTube, I'm going to halt this transmission at this point in time. You guys feel free to join us after the lunch hour around 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be back on line live, living and breathing on the inside. So thank you all for joining us out there, and feel free to jump back in later on this afternoon.